On April 26, Back to Space ambassadors MaryJane and Clement Whitaker had the incredible opportunity to travel to the American Space Museum and sit down with legendary NASA patch artist Tim Gagnon. So, Mr. Gagnon, what got you into the space industry?
First off, you can call me Tim.
Tim. Okay.
I started writing to astronauts in 1973, asking if I could contribute with the design of their patch. When my dad and I came down for the launch of Apollo 17 in December of 72, I discovered that mission patch, the Apollo 17 patch, was painted by Robert McCall, very famous aerospace artist. And that was the first time I knew that outside artists were sometimes used in that capacity. So in 1973, I started writing astronauts, and it only took 31 years for them to say yes. Perseverance.
Yeah. So how did you get to your first launch, the Apollo 17 launch you mentioned?
Well, the program was ending, and of course I was devastated. I was 16 years old. I wrote to my U.S. Senator. His name was Abraham Ribicoff. And I asked if he could contact NASA and arrange for me to be invited to the launch, because I had to see a Saturn V launch.
Sure.
This was a need. And son of a gun, he came back and said, sure, we'll get you an invitation. And
wow.
So then my family, surprised that I got a yes, said, you're going to have to write back. I was 16. I couldn't rent a car. I couldn't rent a hotel room. You know, kids didn't do that stuff in those days.
Yeah.
I didn't have a credit card. And so I had to write back and ask them to invite my dad. And so my dad and I both got invited. And we were down here for 3 days in December of 72 and saw the launch.
So you mentioned it took 32 years for NASA to finally accept your patch.
Well, not NASA, because it wasn't an agency thing. Each crew has the capacity to choose an artist that they like and they're familiar with. And so NASA lets the crew design their patch the way they want it. They have to run it past NASA management to make sure it's not offensive.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard the Gemini 5 was the first crew to have a patch. They had a Conestoga wagon on the patch with a slogan, 8 days or bust.
Yeah.
Well, their mission was designed to go 8 days. And, back in the days when Conestoga wagons were used, a lot of people had signs like California or bust or, whatever. Mm-hmm. And NASA made them cover the slogan because they didn't want, if something happened and the flight didn't go a full 8 days, that everybody would say, well, it busted.
Okay.
So NASA gets final say on the approving the design, but each crew has autonomy to have a patch of their design. It's their patch. So it has to mean something to them.
Okay.
When did you start drawing? Like, when did you get interested in artwork?
Oh, since soon as I could hold a pencil. I mean, I will never fly in space because, and I'll say this publicly, I hate math. I hate it. It makes my brain hurt. I mean, I barely survived Algebra 1 in high school. No, I did okay in Algebra 1. Geometry, I barely survived.
I'm feeling you on that one.
Algebra 2, my sister, she was a whiz. She was like a freaking computer. And she took trigonometry and calculus and everything else. And so she got the right brain in the family. I got the left brain, the creative side. I was the only one of my siblings that could draw. And draw something where if I drew it, you understood what you were looking at. And so, and my paternal grandfather worked in a paper mill in Maine. Oh. So every time they would come to visit, I'd get a free ream of paper and a box of pencils. So I was good to go.
You're set.
Yeah, for sure. So how many patches have you designed to date?
To date, I did during the shuttle program, I was involved with 5 crew patches. And then the space station program, the ISS, we've done 14.
Wow.
Yeah. And I say we because Expedition 11 was the first patch. That was the crew that responded with an affirmative in 2004. And John Phillips was the American astronaut. Sergei Krikalev was the Russian commander. And we worked with them. John was my point of contact person. And once that was revealed at their press conference in February of 2005, I got a email from a surgeon, an orthopedic surgeon who lived in Madrid, a couple of years older than me, and he congratulated me on the accomplishment and said that he had always wanted to do that too. Mm-hmm. Oh. And I wished him well, and I said, of course, growing up, an artist did one, maybe two patches. Okay. If you knew that crew or a member of that crew flew again, you might get to do it again. Bob McCall was the exception to that rule. He did at least seven patches in the shuttle program. He did Apollo 17. He did quite a Apollo Soyuz, and so I said to Jorge, his name is Jorge Kartz. I said, if the opportunity ever arises again, why don't we collaborate? Okay. I know he would appreciate the opportunity. I would like to see his work. So, and the opportunity did arise. The STS-126 crew contacted me to see if I would be willing to help them. And I said, okay, Jorge, you create a patch. Here's the mission. Here's what they're planning to do. You create a design with just that information. I'll create a design with just that information, and we sent both designs to the crew. Okay. And the crew liked some of his stuff, some of my stuff, and eventually it became a patch.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
What do you think has been your most important patch, or the one that is most
prominent? The one that is honestly the most meaningful is when I was getting all those rejection letters, and they were always kind and gracious. Thank you for your support, but we've chosen another artist. And, as a kid growing up in Connecticut, I would hear about crew assignments months later. So, we weren't like front lines of the news in those days. And so I understood all that. And that's one of the other reasons I moved to Florida. And most of the time, the artist they chose was Robert McCall. Okay. And so I finally wrote to Robert McCall in 1982, and he gave me some wonderful advice about studying the art of the past and working hard and overcoming failure with courage. And none of the advice I got in that letter was what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear, here, call this guy, and I'll hook you up. But he was wiser than I was. And he gave me that advice, and so I just kept at it, kept trying, kept submitting art, and it finally succeeded. But in 2009, when the STS-133 was announced, they were going to be the last shuttle flight. Mm-hmm. 134, 135 weren't on the manifest yet. 133 crew contacts Robert McCall. He did the STS-1 patch and do the final shuttle mission patch. Perfect bookends to the program. And if I were in their position, I would too.
Yeah.
I mean, the man was an amazing talent. He submitted 2 painted sketches, and he suddenly passed away. He was 90 years old. Oh, he mailed them on a Friday. He died on Saturday morning. And when the crew finally received the mail, because they heard about him passing, it made the news. And they said, well, that's it. We're dead in the water. And then they get called down to the mailroom, a few days later. And here's this package from Robert McCall. And there was 2 beautiful pieces of art.
Wow.
And so Eric Bowe was the pilot on 133, and he was my point of contact for 126. He said, well, why don't we just get Tim to finish it?
That's so cool.
So it wasn't, because there were things in the design. It was a beautiful design, but there were things they didn't want. Okay. He had a wreath, and I thought was awesome. They had the shuttle launching through a wreath.
Oh, cool.
It was a beautiful patch. And but it looked a lot like the Astronaut Memorial Foundation patch that McCall also designed.
Okay.
So they didn't want that connotation. They didn't want people to mistake their mission patch for a memorial patch. And so we made some changes, and it was like being handed Michelangelo's paintbrush by the Pope and said, finish the ceiling.
Wow.
I mean, it was scary, but it was awesome. And so we very carefully worked on that patch, and we put a big gold star next to the shuttle at the top of the patch for Robert McCall, 2 tiny gold stars for Jorge and I, and then we put our initials into the launch plume at the bottom of the patch,
cool.
the T and a J. Well, it worked because my daughter's name is Tricia, my son-in-law's name is Jason.
There you go.
My grandsons are Tyler and Jack. So
Wow.
T and J worked many ways.
Yeah.
And we said, it may work. Artists have been doing that kind of thing in patches for years. And you don't even sometimes tell the crew. You just do it, hope that it stays, and, you know, and talk about it after the fact.
Yeah.
And I found out that the graphic artist at the Johnson Space Center that takes our raw art and prepares it for decals and printing and envelopes and embroidery and everything else NASA uses it for, his name was Terry Johnson. So that T and J is in the patch.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for watching. You can see more interviews on our channel, such as the one with Charlie Duke and Jim Bridenstine. Please subscribe to stay updated on all of our fun space-related content and give us a comment about a fact you learned about Tim Gagnon.